In the early eras of the Warhammer world, the Old Ones created numerous races in an attempt to thwart the growing power of chaos. One such race was that of the stalwart Dwarves, a stubborn but powerful people that reside mostly deep beneath the World's Edge mountains. According to the legends of the Dwarves, the first of their kind were birthed from the mountains themselves, likely from the southernmost tip of the World's Edge mountains, which can be found deep in the steaming jungles of the Southlands. The first hold they founded was that of Karak-Zorn, though it fell to the Lizardmen many ages before the modern era. To the first of the Dwarves, the Old Ones gifted knowledge of how to mine rare metals from the earth, and how to bind the winds of magic into runes. This first generation of Dwarves would prove to be the mightiest of their entire race, a small family that would protect their kin and lead them into greatness. These godlike Dawi would come to be remembered by their descendants as the Ancestor Gods. First and most important of their number was Grundy. Grundy is the god of mining and smiths, considered by dwarves to be the most important of all gods, for it is he who first discovered the knowledge of mining and smelting ores. He is credited with inventing iron and steel, passing this art on to his kin, which enabled the dwarves to fight their foes with superior weaponry and armor. The Smith God also showed his people how to bind the winds of magic into runes that could augment their equipment with supernatural powers. It is using this method that he created his greatest work, the Throne of Power, which he built for his son, Snorri Whitebeard, 4,421 years before the rise of the Empire. Grundy is worshipped most by the miners, smiths, and engineers who work the rock and metal of the mountains. He has a shrine in every hold, though his greatest is in Karak-Azul, which is famous for its excellent armories and weaponsmiths. In Dwarven legend, he led the Dawi away from the increasing perils of the upper world and into the safety of the earth. He encouraged the dwarves to hide beneath the mountains in their vast holds just before chaos erupted into the world. This shielded them from the worst of the storm that was caused by the birth of chaos, protecting them from the mutation and madness that created the likes of the Beastmen. Grundy also discovered the art of metalworking, though he was likely taught this by the Old Ones themselves. He is the husband of Valia and the brother of Grimnir, and is also the father of many of the other Ancestor Gods. Next would be Valia, goddess of healing and protection. Valia is unique in being the only female dwarf ancestor god. The goddess was unmatched in her skill at dampening enemy magic, able to deaden the winds of magic and redirect spells harmlessly into the earth. She also established most of the dwarf holds, and taught the dwarves how to make protective wards, the use of runes, and the art of brewing. She also taught the dwarves the importance of bonding in community within the clans, as well as having strong dwellings. Valia is the protector of hold and clan, blessing her devotees with special powers of protection against magic and the influence of chaos. All of her priestesses are women that often provide as the healers, midwives, and community leaders among the dwarves. The goddess's runes of protection often guard the many sacred places of the dwarves, able to banish any demons, undead, or other foul creatures that stumble in while the runes yet remain active. Valia spent most of her time wandering the World's Edge mountains, as the dwarves migrated north from their birthlands to those purged free of monsters by the axe of Grimnir and Grundy. She helped her people establish holds, and journeyed between all of them to help build the communities that would one day become the many clans that are known in the modern age. When chaos invaded the world, Valia returned to her favorite hold to help defend her people, 4,523 years before Sigmar forged the Empire. she requested that 2 immense pillars be carved from the rock in the monstrous main cavern, which she blessed upon their completion. These 2 were the first of thousands of pillars that now make up the Great Hall of Karaz-a-Karak, the unbreakable capital of the Dwarf realm. This year also marked the founding of Dwarven record-keeping. Last of the 3 greatest Ancestor Gods was the brother of Grundy, Grimnir the Fearless, the warrior god of the Dawi. He personifies the undaunted courage and fearlessness of the Dwarven race. He taught the Dwarves the art of battle, from combat styles to strategy, and cast back the horrors of the mountains, as well as giants, trolls, and greenskins. Forged 2 mighty runic axes made from star metal gromrel, as well as a suit of armor as impenetrable as the mountains themselves by Grundy. Grimnir fought off the various monsters, including the dragons, which emerged to threaten the mountain realms of the Dawi clans. He slayed the father of dragons, Skaladrak, during the war against dragons, in a final battle so devastating that it created Blackfire Pass. After the coming of chaos to the Warhammer world, raw magic poured down from the shattered gate to the north. Wielding his twin axes, Grimnir slammed into the armies of chaos with unquenchable wrath, scouring the world's edge mountains of demons, and winning a short reprieve for the dwarves. While chasing down the last of the demons out of the mountains, he met Kalidor Dragon Tamer, and the 2 fought side by side against the rallied beastmen herds of the old world. Grimnir gifted to Kalidor an unnamed runic amulet of immense power, and to the Ancestor God was given the Crystal of Fire, which remains in the vaults of Karaz-a-Karak as proof of this meeting. The warrior god gave the knowledge to Kalidor that the storms of chaos came from the north, and sowed the seeds of Kalidor's plan to enact the great ritual. When chaos returned to the world yet again, Grimnir vowed to march north to close the gate Kalidor had theorized was allowing demons into the world. Grundy told him that he would surely die, but Grimnir was determined to uphold his vow. He shaved his head save for 1 crest of hair that ran from the nape of his neck to his forehead. Leaving one of his axes to his son Morgrim, the Slayer god departed for the north. He was never seen again, though his fate is unknown. The dwarves will only say that he fell in darkness long ago. Although all dwarves worship the 3 great Ancestor Gods, the cult of Slayers venerate Grimnir in particular, and they paint his runes on their bare flesh. They emulate his final actions by shaving their heads as he did, and setting out to seek fights against near-invincible monsters and endless hordes so that they can die a glorious doom. This is often to atone for some sin committed during their lifetime, for dwarves take failings extremely seriously, and should a Dawi fail to finish a oath that he has sworn or has committed some terrible deed, he is expected to take the Slayer Oath, which essentially is him declaring that he has already died. But to have a chance to make it to the dwarf afterlife and sit at the great table in Grundy's hall with his ancestors, he must seek a mighty doom against a worthy monster or army of enemies in order to atone for his sins and regain his honor. Of the various artifacts of Grimnir, the only 2 to remain in the possession of the dwarves are his twin weapons. One of the axes of Grimnir is wielded by Thorgrim Grudgebearer, the current High King of the dwarves. The other is supposedly in the possession of Gotrek Gurnison, as many say that it rivals Thorgrim's axe in power and ability. There are also lesser deities among the Ancestor Gods. Each of these beings is related to the 3 primary gods, but don't play quite as important of a role as the founding ancestors. Eldest of these lesser gods is Gazoo, lord of the Underearth and protector of the Dwarven dead. He is often seen as the most gloomy and reflective of the gods, for even in the time when the ancestors walked the earth, Gazoo pondered long on the mortality of his race. He ended up establishing the Dwarven tradition of venerating their ancestors, whether living or dead, to combat this concern. He also uncovered the signature runes for himself and his sibling gods, Grundy, Valia, and Grimnir. These signature runes gave the Ancestor Gods and their followers power to overcome even their most depraved enemies. Next is Smed Nana, Shaper of Ore, son of Grundy and Valia. He is a Dwarfen deity of some importance, due to his patronage of metalworking and the refining of ore. In dwarf legend, it was Smed Nana who taught his brother Thugni the art of craftsmanship and metalworking. Together, these two sons of Grundy and Valia made a number of the great runic weapons of the dwarf gods and the legendary dwarven kings. This includes the magical hammer Gal Maraz, which once belonged to the great king Kurgan, then was given as a gift to the human barbarian named Sigmar. The legendary weapon of Smed Nana was the rune hammer Azulukrid, which means metal crafter. Then there is Smed Nana's younger brother Thugni, ancestor god of runesmiths. He is the patron of runic magic and runesmithing. According to dwarf lore, Thugni ventured deep into the earth during the long migration that took the dwarves from the Southlands to the northern regions where they now reside. He spent considerable time in a mysterious place he called Ancor Bryn, the Glittering Realm. When he emerged, Thugni brought the secret of runic magic to the dwarf race, though he discovered that only Grundy and a few of his descendants had the gift to inscribe runic magic. Thugni and his progeny labeled to produce weapons of power before the cataclysm foretold by Grundy struck the dwarves. Aided by his brother Smed Nana, Thugni crafted some of the most potent runic weapons ever forged. He personally wielded the rune hammer Karaz Kazakrun, which means enduring war rune. Although we know that he learned the ability to inscribe magical runes into weapons from this glittering realm, it is unclear exactly where or what this mysterious realm was. The final lesser ancestor god that we know a bit about is Morgrim, ancestor god of engineers and son of Grimnir. Morgrim was the first dwarf engineer. He developed and taught his clans the techniques of crafting engines of war and other devices. Before the coming of chaos, Morgrim and his descendants crafted bolt throwers and stone throwers of all sizes, and devised traps to form the first line of defense against the invading horrors foretold by Grundy. In the later stages of the first Chaos incursion, Morgrim joined Grimnir on his quest to close the Northern Chaos Gate. However, he honored his father's final request by returning reluctantly to his people rather than following his father up to the mighty doom that would await him at the Northern Pole. When the forces of Chaos were finally defeated and banished back to the north where they would be contained for quite some time, Morgrim returned to the depths of the world with the other ancestor gods, their task completed. Morgrim, during his time on the mortal plane, wielded one of Grimnir's axes, named Anki-Gruni, which means Widowmaker. This is likely the axe that is now in the possession of Thorgrim Grudgebearer. There are also a number of much lesser known ancestor gods, though most of their information has been lost from memory over the millennia. They are as follows: Gromo, the Wanderer, god of rootless dwarves and rangers. Hrognor, god of the unworthy, also known as the god of the Order of the Denied. Kriegnar and Morgri, gods of conflict and war. Thruk, god of smithing and forges, and Throrin, who is considered the patron god of slayers. Then there are dwarves of immense power that were also close kin of the ancestor gods, such as High King Snorri Whitebeard, who was the eldest son of Grundy. However, he is not considered a technical ancestor god by the dwarves, due to a myriad of reasons we'll get into in a later video. Though it is worth noting that after his death, he did come back as a extremely powerful revenant known as the White Dwarf, or Grombrindrol. The final possible ancestor god of the dwarves is Hashut, the Father of Darkness, who is the patron deity of the Chaos Dwarves, also known as the Dawizar. However, it is extremely unclear whether or not he was actually a Dwarven god or is a demon that appeared during the first Chaos Incursion that the Chaos Dwarves turned to survive. There's very little information regarding the origin of Hashut, and we don't know whether or not he's actually a demonic entity or if he's like the Dwarves' version of the devil. So it's possible that he existed pre the first Chaos Incursion, and if so, is an actual ancestor god, the one the dwarves don't worship actively. Or it's possible that he is just an immensely powered demonic figure that appeared during the first Chaos Incursion that got the worship of the Dawizar. Lastly, the Ancestor Gods are one of the few pantheons that actually plays an active role during the end times. So I will briefly go over what happened to the Ancestor Gods we know about that showed up during that. Valia was discovered by Thoric Ironbrow, but before he could awaken her, he was attacked by a combined army of Krell and Neferata, and was also ambushed by a Greenskin horde. For Neferata had discovered the resting place of Valia many millennia prior, and she was coming there to offer the Ancestor Goddess as a token gesture to Nagash, so that Nagash wouldn't explode her head from the inside for betraying him thousands of years earlier. Sadly, during that final conflict, Thoric Ironbrow and the King of Karakazul both fell fighting against the undead, and the forces of Nagash were able to capture Valia, and he ended up devouring her magic and godlike essence to make himself more powerful. Before I go into this final segment, if you have not read the Gotrek and Felix book Slayer and you intend to, you're probably going to want to skip this because I'm going to be going into some pretty major spoilers. So just click past the video. I'll put an annotation right here that you can just click on to skip this portion. For the rest of you, Grimnir appeared in the final Gotrek and Felix book Slayer, where it was revealed he had been holding shut a gate of chaos for thousands of years single-handedly against the gods of chaos and their demonic legions. Gotrek and Felix battled the Ancestor God before he declared them worthy of what was to come. Thorgrim had died prior to this event, and because of that, Grimnir had reclaimed the last of his twin axes and now gave it to Gotrek, who possessed the other axe, thus reuniting the runic weapons. Grimnir charged Gotrek with holding the gateway to chaos, and he left that realm in order to go fight alongside the Dwarven race at their final stand in Middenheim. This was the final doom of Gotrek, and is also where Felix died, and was the end of that entire amazing series, which made me super sad. Gotrek in this moment became the new Grimnir, so to speak, but that has more to do with the Age of Sigmar and things that happened afterwards, which I will probably never go into on this channel. But in any event, that is what happened with the Ancestor Gods during the end times. Grundy never appeared during the end times. And that pretty much wraps up all the concrete information about the Ancestor Gods, but we're going to do a little bit of speculation before we wrap things up. One of the things we know is that the Old Ones were the ones who taught the dwarves how to mine and how to craft steel and iron. These are obviously things that Grundy passed on to the dwarves. So it seems that Grundy was one of the few that was capable of being in the physical presence of the Old Ones. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the lore of the Lizardmen, only the first generation Slaanesh could actually physically handle that. If even a second generation Slaanesh, or any being lesser, which is most of what resides in the Warhammer world, tried to communicate with the Old Ones, their physical presence would cause your brain to explode. There are a couple of dragons, who can handle it, and it appears Grundy could handle it as well, which goes to show that the Ancestor Gods were, whether they were just immensely powerful dwarves, or they were something that the Old Ones created to teach the dwarves, is a rather large question. We know that they were formed from the rock itself, at least according to Dwarven legend. So it's possible that they were something that, although was dwarf-like in appearance, were not actually dwarves, but this seems very unlikely, as they fathered a number of the race. It's probably most likely that they were just the first of the dwarves, and somehow were just the most powerful by that name. In Warhammer, age tends to be directly related to power for most races. The other I thought is Thungni clearly went to another realm to discover the art of making runic things, to learn the art of taking the raw magic from the world and binding it into runes where it became very reliable and predictable and sturdy. Obviously, after he showed this method to his father Grundy, Grundy perfected it and made it in created things like the golems that I will talk about in the Dwarven race video, or the Throne of Power, which of course has a rune so powerful on it, the Rune of Azamar, that should it crack, it would signify the doom of the entire Dwarven race. Where Thungni went is likely the Realm of Chaos, or at least the Realm of Chaos before it was tainted by demons. He likely found a hidden path of the Old Ones, or maybe what he might have done is discovered a way to physically access the nexus of power that the Old Ones set up across the world, which, for those of you who don't know, when the Old Ones came to the world, and I go over this in the Old One video, which you can click here and watch that, but the Old Ones set up a series of points where they built temples, castles, waystones, and other things, and the Lizardmen built most of these sites that funneled the natural magical power of the earth itself, and was this huge and powerful pool that could be drawn from to funnel their greatest power. The only race that currently still has access to it is the Lizardmen, and it's why the Slaughtered are able to use immensely powerful magics without just dying horribly, because it's actually separate from the power of chaos and is more pure. So because he calls it the Glittering Realm and didn't just get torn apart by demons or lose his mind, it's quite possible that Thungni discovered a way to access this place and learned how to channel the magic from the earth itself into runes, which would explain their very concrete and predictable nature, and would also explain why runes tend to be the direct antithesis to the magic wielded by all the other races of the world, which is used from the winds of magic, which are naturally chaotic and are inherently tied to the realm of chaos. So it's possible that the dwarves actually had quite a bit of access and close relationship to the Old Ones. It may even be possible, though this I significantly doubt, that the Ancestor Gods were actually Old Ones themselves. Though this I would think is very, very unlikely, due to the fact that the Ancestor Gods had flaws in a sense of personality, and the Old Ones are not perfect beings, but none of them are noted for their personalities. They're not stubborn or insular or any of those things, and they supposedly all died with the end of the world, with the beginning of the world, when chaos came screaming into it. So it is most likely that the Ancestor Gods were extremely powerful beings created directly by the Ancestor Gods, either from a evolution of various races, or maybe carved from the very mountains themselves, and were able to not only withstand the presence of the Old Ones, in the case of Grundy, who is the greatest of the Ancestor Gods, but were able to learn to access the natural network of the Earth's magical power, which is an incredible feat, being Thungni having discovered access to the Glittering Realm, or the Ankorbrins, during the age before chaos came into the world. There's also the note that Grundy knew the Old Ones in some sense, because he warned the dwarves that chaos was coming. He told his people that a time would come when a great storm would come out of the north, and when it happened that they all needed to retreat beneath the mountains where they would be safe. There's no way he could have known this unless the Old Ones told him, because Grundy is not well known for having prophetic powers. So it is likely when the war between the war in the heavens, so the war between the Old Ones and the Gods of Chaos, was getting in its climax when they created most of these races, though the climax, of course, lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Grundy was likely directly warned by the Old Ones, who taught him the art of mining and how to really make the mountains his own, that chaos was coming and that he would need to be prepared for it. So it's really amazing to think that there might have been such a close connection between the founding gods of the world and the dwarves, which the elves, for instance, don't have that relationship, neither do humans or ogres. None of them have that relationship with the Old Ones like the dwarves did, making the dwarves only behind the lizardmen in having had direct contact with the Old Ones. And that pretty much wraps up tonight's video on the Ancestor Gods. Thank you so much for watching. I apologize for my recent hiatus. My house is currently under construction, and there's been lots of loud noises, such as hammers slamming into walls and gigantic saws cutting up concrete. So it's very messy and there's dust everywhere. But I should be back to my regular recording schedule, as most of the heavier stuff is done. If you're interested in supporting the channel, or feeding the serpent as I call it, feel free to click on the Patreon button and visit my Patreon page. There are incentives for different levels of donations, such as having me teach you Warhammer, or being able to vote on what video should come out next, or just little things like seeing videos come out early. If you scroll over my Facebook or Twitter notation there, or go down to the description below, you can also find access to those pages, which will let you interact with me or see what kind of videos are coming out in the future, or cool things that I find from time to time. Thank you again so much for watching. We are back on the regular video producing schedule. Thank you all for your patience. Got some really exciting stuff coming this week. So take care. Have a good night.